ladies and gentlemen, in order for Donald Trump to be able to serve a third term, he would have to defy the Constitution, because the Constitution bars presidents from serving 3 terms. After, I believe it was Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 22nd Amendment, as well as the 12th Amendment, was ratified, saying that for the 22nd Amendment, only a president can serve 2 terms and no more than 2 terms. And then the 12th Amendment bars a president from being able to serve as vice president after their third term, or after their second term, excuse me. Let's take a look at this new reporting by the Democracy Docket. Shout out to Mark Elias and the Democracy Foundation, as well as Democracy Forward. The article, ladies and gentlemen, is titled, "To Serve a Third Term, Trump Would Have to Defy the Constitution." And ladies and gentlemen, the article reads, the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, is clear, quote, "No person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice," unquote. And yet, President Donald Trump may think he can somehow skirt that law. In a recent interview with NBC News, Trump did not rule out a third term in the White House, emphasizing that he is not, quote, "not joking," unquote, about somehow defying the Constitution. Quote, "A lot of people want me to do it," unquote, Trump said, adding that, quote, "But I mean, I basically tell them we have a long way to go, you know. It's very early in the administration," unquote. The comments have already prompted some controversy in Congress, with Representative Dan Goldman, who's a Democrat from New York, introducing a House resolution reaffirming term limits for presidents. Controversially, Representative Ugly's Representative Tennessee introduced a House resolution proposing a change to the Constitution to allow someone to be elected president a third term if they didn't serve 2 consecutive terms. In this context, ladies and gentlemen, Representative Andy Ogles is Andrew Ogles is talking about Donald Trump. Nobody else. A lawyer for Trump looked into ways around the 22nd Amendment in 2023, the Wall Street Journal reported Wednesday. The 22nd Amendment was drafted in the aftermath of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's death in 1945, Roosevelt was the only president who served more than 2 terms in the White House, though the 2-term limit wasn't law, but a long-held precedent honored by all the previous presidents. In 1940, with American edging closer to entering World War II, and still in the aftermath of the Great Depression, Roosevelt had made a compelling case to voters to stay in the White House for a 3rd term. By 1947, Congress approved the 22nd Amendment, and it was ratified into the United States Constitution in 1951. Ladies and gentlemen, it's clear that Trump can't run or be elected for a 3rd term, but there are a few theories floating around about how he could legally end up president again. Most rely on the fact that the language of the amendment bars a 3rd, quote, election, unquote, but doesn't explicitly say a president can't serve a 3rd term. The most popular theories involve Vice President J.D. Vance running in 2028 with Trump as his running mate, and then stepping down after he's elected. But most legal scholars agree that these theories are bunk. Quote, thinking a president can serve a 3rd term through some ingenious scam, I think, is like thinking a VP can preside over his own impeachment trial, the constitutional equivalent of a scrivener's error, unquote. Jamal Green, a constitutional law scholar at the Columbia Law School, posted on Blue Sky, quote, constitutional law isn't a word game, unquote. I don't know. I think Donald Trump and his lackeys and his lawless illegal administration may think different. Writing online constitutional law scholar Michael Rosen also threw water on this theory, explaining that with the 22nd Amendment, Trump, quote, cannot be elected president again, and therefore he cannot be elected vice president, unquote. Aziz Hugh, a constitutional law scholar at the University of Chicago Law School, told Democracy Docket that while, quote, there are a sort of clever in the pejorative sense, lawyerly arguments for how Trump might circumvent it, unquote. There's no way of interpreting the 22nd Amendment other than to impose a 2-term limit for U.S. presidents. But the real danger, said Hugh, isn't how Trump might try to skirt the rules. to serve a third term, it's that he will ignore the rules altogether, and no one will stop him. After all, the Trump administration recently appeared to ignore a court's order to halt the deportations illegally. Ladies and gentlemen, my editorials note. Venezuelans to El Salvador without due process, setting off a potential constitutional crisis. Quote, we're at a political moment where all sorts of legal limits and constitutional limits are just being flatly ignored, unquote, Hugh said. The power of the 22nd Amendment is only as good as the court's willingness to enforce it. And given how the Supreme Court ruled last year's case about presidential immunity, in which it handed Trump illegally. Ladies and gentlemen, my editorials note. A victory that legal scholars said could set a dangerous precedent. HUQ doesn't have faith that the nation's highest court would prevent Trump from serving a third term. Quote, I don't think the question is, quote, semicolon, well, what does the law allow, question mark? I think the question is, who stands behind the law? Are the relevant actors going to enforce the law? Unquote. He asked. Ladies and gentlemen, it says he said, but he really asked the question. So that's why I said he asked instead of he said. The whole situation creates a catch-22, HUQ added. Taking Trump's comments about a potential third term seriously legitimizes pseudo constitutional arguments that aren't normally worth paying attention to. But ignoring these theories also allows them to fester. Quote, either way, it does damage to the law of democracy, unquote, HUQ said, adding that, quote, it just seems to me a no-win situation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, looks like that's going to do it for today's legal breaking, reporting, and analysis update. If you did enjoy this reporting and legal breaking analysis update, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and enjoy firstly. Secondly, if you want to make sure you never miss a brand new legal breaking reporting, please hit the bell icon located beneath the screen here on the right hand side of the screen. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, please help me reach and achieve the goal of 160 plus subscribers. The reason why I'm saying 160 plus subscribers is because right after we reach and achieve the goal of 160 plus subscribers, we have more subscribers to reach and achieve right after we reach and achieve the goal of 160 subscribers. Fourthly, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys would also like to stay up to date, as well as the bell icon, or as well as hitting the bell icon, you can do so by following me on my social medias that I will have linked in the video description down below. I'm on Instagram, Snapchat, and Threads, as well as TikTok. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, please stay positive, please stay safe, and until my next legal breaking reporting, know that justice will prevail on the correct side of the law eventually, hopefully, despite Donald Trump and his illegal regimes. Unconstitutional, illegal, unlawful, lawlessness, and illegal executive orders and illegal behaviors.